friends, and welcome to Tuesday. Today I'm going to read you chapter 4 of Pugs of the Frozen North. Yesterday, Monday, when we read chapters 2 and 3. And in these chapters, Shen met Sika, and she is going to take some of his dogs in exchange for some dog food. Chapter 4. Up the steep slope behind the Po of Ice they went, puffing and panting, pushing the heavy sled ahead of them. They soon grew hot despite the cold. Sika pulled off her mittens and hood and let the snowflakes settle in her hair. But it was all worth it when they reached the top of the headland. From there they could see the pugs out on the ice. The heap of little dogs under the blanket of sweaters looked like a knitted tent. Shen and Sika climbed into the sled beside the dog food bin, and Sika pushed off. The sled went swooshing down the headland's flank. Its runners threw up huge fans of powdery snow as Sika leaned this way and that to steer the sled around the rocks and frozen bushes that loomed in its path. "Whee!" she shouted. "Rah!" screamed Shen. The cliffs at the headland's edge were drawing closer. You can see them here, sledding down to get the pugs. But Sika knew the headland well, and she aimed the sled at the place where the cliffs were lowest. They weren't really cliffs at all, more like a stony step, and the sled shot over it, landed with a thump on the sea ice, and kept going, slithering between the frozen waves, almost all the way to the camp. The heap of pugs heard them coming. 66 small dark specks bounced and yapped upon the ice, wagging their tails in welcome. "There are the dogs," said Shen. "Where?" said Sika, looking around. "Those are dogs." The pugs had caught the scent of dog food. They crowded around the sled, yipping and whining, wagging their tails. Shen opened the dog food bin and shoveled out scoopfuls of kibble. Soon the yapping was replaced by crunching. Shen looked at them happily. Then he looked behind him. Sika was sitting on the sled. She had her head in her hands, and she was crying. So Shen is happily feeding the pugs the food, and Sika has a look of surprise on her face. "What's the matter?" he asked. Went Sika. Tears trickled down her face and dripped off her chin and froze before they hit the ice, where they landed with tiny plinking sounds. She said. "When you said you had 66 dogs, I thought you meant real ones." "These are real ones," said Shen. "No, they're not. They can't pull a sled." "Oh," said Shen. Now he understood. So that was why she wanted some of his dogs. He looked at the sled, the bigness of it. "I needed a team of huskies to tow it, not a team of pugs." "I thought Grandpa could enter the race after all," sniffled Sika, "and now I'll have to go home and tell him it's hopeless." "What race?" asked Shen. "The Great Northern Race," said Sika miserably. "When true winter comes, the teams arrive from all over the north. They will race through the night forest and across the frozen sea, all the way to the Snowfather's palace at the top of the world." Shen scratched his head. He remembered the charts he'd seen on board the Lucky Star. The North Pole was just a patch of bare paper so big and white it made him want to get out a pencil and draw anything on it. "There isn't a palace at the top of the world," he said. "There is if there's a true winter," said Sika. "That's where the Snowfather lives, and he grants the wish of the first adventurer to reach it." He sighed. "Grandpa almost won it once, when he was not much older than me. Such stories he tells about the journey, and he's waited and waited for true winter to return ever since. He kept the sled and bred the best team of dog sleds in the north. But true winter only comes once in a lifetime. The dogs got old and died, and Grandpa got old too, and soon he'll die. And now true winter is here at last. And when you said dogs, I thought you meant big dogs. I thought Grandpa would be able to race after all, and I'd go with him to the North Pole and see the Snowfather. But these are just toy dogs." "No, they're not," said Shen. "Just because they're tiny doesn't mean they're not strong and loyal and brave. And I have leashes and little harnesses for them. I bet they could pull you and your grandpa all the way to the North Pole easily." Sika didn't look as if she believed him, so he ran and got a sack of leashes and harnesses, which was still laying on the ice when the Lucky Star had gone down. He started shoving pugs into the harness and clipping the leashes on the harnesses and knotting the other ends to Sika's sled. He was very good at knots, having grown up on a ship. The pugs caught his excitement and started to yip and yap and dance around, straining and pulling at the heavy things he'd hitched to them. 10 pugs couldn't shift the sled at all. 20 couldn't. Even when 30 were attached, it didn't budge. And Sika said, "See, these aren't sled dogs. It's hopeless." But when 40 dogs were tied on, the big sled stirred and slid a few inches over the ice. When 50 were attached, it started to gather speed. When the 66th was in position, Sika shouted, "Mush, doggies, mush!" And it shot away as speedily as any normal husky-powered sled. It whizzed over the frozen waves, throwing up fans of powdered ice each time it turned. The pugs were getting used to running on ice. They kept trembling over each other and getting their leashes tangled at first. But as soon as they soon sorted themselves out, and by the time Sika had circled the pile of sweaters 6 times, the sled was running straight and true. She grinned at Shen, her face all rosy with cold and happiness. "It must be the best dog sled ever. Can I really take your tiny dogs to the North Pole?" Shen felt a bit unsure about that. He hadn't meant to give her all the dogs. He was going to miss them, but Sika had saved them, and he didn't want to make her cry again. So he said, "All right. I can't wait to tell Grandpa," she said. And she took a spare leash and cracked it in. There's a picture of the pugs pulling the sled. And cracked it in the air above the pugs' tiny heads like a whip. 264 tiny paws pattered on the ice. 66 little voices howled, "Oh!" And the sled set back off, back toward the land and the Po of ice. All the little pugs pulling that sled. And that is the end of chapter 4. I'll see you tomorrow for chapter 5.